a way to improve your soil that is as easy as
1, 2, 3.
dig a hole, bury food scraps, and cover it back. We did exactly that in this raised bed a few years ago, and so I'm going to share with you 7 food scraps you must bury in your garden right now before winter. The first food scrap that I'm burying is eggshells. Eggshells are rich in calcium, and many gardeners think it's great for adding to the soil to prevent blossom and rot on their tomatoes. But most garden soil isn't actually lacking calcium at all, and the actual reason for tomatoes getting blossom and rot is because of bad watering practices. You could add eggshells whole like these, or you could do what I like to do, which is to crush them up into a finer thing. So you would just crush them up with your hand. So it's kind of like this one over here. And I just would add it into the garden like that. And an extra bonus way eggshells help your garden is if you grind it up very fine, earthworms will be able to use it as grit, which help them break down the kitchen scraps that we'll be adding to our raised beds later. The second food scrap to bury in your garden before winter is coffee grounds and tea bags with their tea grounds inside of them. Coffee grounds and tea grounds are an excellent source of nitrogen, which will break down over the winter so that they can be used by your plants in the spring. The way I like to bury my tea bags is that I actually will first try and remove them, and then I'll just sprinkle it inside of the hole or wherever I'm trying to put it. I also have some in this glass jar, which I'll also add to it. The third food scrap to bury in your garden is banana peels. Banana peels is one of the more common food scraps, and we could use it to put it back into the garden. One of the main reasons to bury banana peels is because of the potassium that it has. Now, some sources would say that banana peels has lots and lots of potassium, but the truth is that banana peels won't have a super high amount of potassium, as it's not like a fertilizer, but it will have some potassium in it, maybe like a tomato or any other fruit. I don't have banana peels today, but if you have a lot of them, go ahead and bury them in the garden. The fourth thing on my list is the boxes from the eggshells that we buried earlier. Egg boxes are made with cardboard, and that means we could add them to the garden. Cardboard will give the earthworms that comes a place to live in while they eat up all the good kitchen scraps and stuff that we'll be adding to this hole. The worms will also eat the cardboard and turn it into organic matter, which improves drainage, and as the worms move throughout the bed, they will also aerate the soil. Egg boxes that have any plastic labels will need to be removed the labels first before you could add them to the garden. And then to bury them, I'm just going to be ripping the boxes into strips so that they're smaller pieces. And then with the cardboard we have here, we could add them into the holes that we have for them in this raised bed. The fifth thing to bury in your garden before winter is kelp. Kelp is so full of nutrients that they use them in professional football fields and golf courses to make the grass grow healthier. But how does kelp help our garden? The kelp that we bury in our garden will break down over winter, and then in the spring, when we plant our plants, it will help our plants to grow roots faster and get established in the spring so that they can produce earlier. Kelp will also help our plants to grow lots of roots so that they have a big root system. Kelp also help our plants to absorb nutrients that are in the soil better. It's kind of like you trying to get from point A to point B, and kelp is basically for our plants the car or the vehicle that the nutrients can get into, and then they get from point A to our plants. So now to add kelp, what I find the best way is actually, if you're using a kelp powder, is to sprinkle it on the surface of the bed. That way it gets more incorporated all throughout the bed instead of just all in one big spot. And you don't want to do it too high, otherwise you'll waste some of the powder. The sixth thing to bury is the kitchen scraps that I have in this bucket. Sometimes some of the food that we eat could go bad, or you have the leftovers from the cooking of the meal. Well, we could save those and use them to bury in the garden, so that way we recycle the nutrients back into the soil. So in this bucket I have some celery leaves that are kind of yellow. I also have some melons that went bad, and some carrot tops, which we don't eat the very top here, and some onion peels, I also have a squash down inside this bucket and some other squash peels. And now I'm going to bury it in this raised bed. There's already some earthworms in this raised bed as I'm digging up, which is good because they'll break down the kitchen scraps for us. The seventh thing, which can be a food scrap, will help attract earthworms to all of the kitchen scraps that we bury so they start working it and turn it into nutrient-rich soil. The bait to bury for the earthworms and attract them is some wheat bran, which this is from after we sift wheat flour, or you could also use some cornmeal. We have a worm bin, and whenever we feed them some of this wheat, they go crazy after this thing, so it's the perfect thing to bury in the garden. And now I'm gonna add some of this wheat bran that I have here into the hole with the veggie scraps. You could also sprinkle it around the outside to help bring the earthworms from around. If you have any bread that is going bad or that is stale, you can bury it in your garden, and it will also help to attract the earthworms because it is made with flour. Now I'm going to be covering back the hole that we dug for these kitchen scraps. The food scraps and the things that we bury today will break down over winter and turn into nutrient-rich soil. As the kitchen scraps break down, they'll also become organic matter, and organic matter will help to create nice, fluffy soil, which is what we want, especially if you have a clay soil. But if organic matter improves the soil, which it does, if we add more organic matter to the soil, will it improve the soil faster? Will you watch this video over here on 9 more things to bury in your garden?